President Obama came on the TV to talk about the Charleston massacre, and he actually mentioned the 16th Street Baptist Church while we were standing right across the street from it. But what was very interesting about President Obama's comments was, as he always has been doing, is he shifted the focus away from racial violence and racial oppression to gun control. And everybody paused for a minute. And when Obama said, "I've talked about this so many times before," everyone thought he may speak to race. But of course he didn't, and he took it to gun violence. So it's crystal clear, brothers and sisters. Some of you who believe that he was going to somehow put on a black Superman suit, I think you've got your wake-up call. You know, sometimes it's hard to admit that you've been made a fool of. But it's better to admit it now so you can do something about it, as opposed to sitting around hoping and praying that he puts on a Superman suit. Now, the Charleston massacre didn't take place in a vacuum. It was the culmination of all the racist energy that has been taking place since Obama took office. It was motivated by the acquittal of Zimmerman in the Trayvon case. It was motivated by the acquittal of the killer cop in Ferguson. It was motivated by the situation involving Eric Gardner. It was motivated by Walter Scott and others, and I had a chance to go. They took me in Charleston to the area where Walter Scott was assassinated, and they walked me through that whole piece. But be that as it may, brothers and sisters, all of this is happening because black folk have done nothing about the previous situations. And one thing I said, and I was in South Florida when the Trayvon Martin verdict came out. I'll never forget it because it was so quiet. You could walk through the street and you could hear an ant crawl. I mean, black people were literally stunned after the Trayvon situation. And I said that night that because Zimmerman walked, we're going to see more cases like this. It's going to get worse. From a psychological perspective, one of the laws that, our profession is founded on is the belief that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. That's one of the laws of psychology. You want to know what they're likely to do tomorrow? What did they do yesterday? Not only that, in psychology, we believe that whenever a behavior is committed, if nothing is done to reduce that behavior, it's going to increase over time. Behavior never stands still. And it is the consequences of behavior that determines if it's more likely or less likely to occur again. So the reason Baltimore happened is because there was no consequences for Ferguson. Keep in mind, Zimmerman was not a police officer. That white boy down in Charleston was not a police officer. But it did not matter because the precedent had been set in allowing white folk to kill black folk unarmed. You see. And so I'm saying that to say, as the brother alluded to earlier, it's going to get even worse because there's no repercussions. Queen Mother Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said very poignantly that the time for forgiveness is over. The time for forgiveness is over. And to that end, we also have to look at how our religious immaturity plays a significant role in what people do to us. Our religious immaturity. I mean, forgiving the killer before he's even been sentenced. That killed 6 mothers in that church. 6 mothers were murdered and 3 brothers. And you're forgiving people before they even convicted or sentenced. And we see the white folk are already scurrying to their most popular defense whenever white folk do something to black folk, and that is to claim mental illness. To claim mental illness. And I don't know if you noticed, but from the time they found him, and of course they gave him overnight to get prepared, because they knew exactly where he was and when. Okay, nothing happens in this country that is not under surveillance. Absolutely nothing from no one. But when they went to pick him up, they put a bulletproof vest on the white boy to make sure no black folks would take a shot at him. And they didn't do him like they do black folk when they arrest them. They didn't grab him by the neck and hold him on the head. He was chaperoned around, treated with the best of conditions, never once referred to as a thug or a criminal from anyone, not even President Obama, who was so quick to refer to the brothers and sisters in Baltimore as thugs and criminals. So quick to refer to the brothers and sisters in Ferguson as thugs and criminals. And here's a who killed 6 women, and you don't even use a single pejorative term to describe him. Not Anderson Cooper, not Don Lemon, not Wolf Blitzer, not one of them would use a term to describe him that was similarly used for brothers and sisters who took nobody's life, but just revolted against unpleasant conditions. And the interesting thing about that, brothers and sisters, is that there's a growing divide in our community between the youth and the adults. Not just the youth and the elders, but those who are under the age of 25 and those who are above the age of 35. Baltimore showed us more than ever before that the youth are a fearless generation. The problem is they don't have fearless supervision. They don't have fearless guidance. They don't have fearless wisdom to turn to. Everyone's telling them to go home and register to vote. As if voting had something to do with Charleston. As if voting has something to do with Baltimore. Our youth know that the vote in and of itself doesn't bring about any necessary change. And they're upset with us probably more than they're upset with white folk, because they can see the fear in our eyes. And one thing we got to understand about youth, and I know because I work with them, it is hard for them to humble themselves to adults who, so they out there fighting naked, they out there fighting blind. Because we got our retirement and we got our 401k, they know are not willing to stand up to the power structure and defend their honor. You will never get the respect of your children as long as they know you're too afraid of the oppressor to do anything about the situation. We got our nice jobs, so we say just go home and let the process take sway. You know nothing gonna happen, but you don't care because you comfortable. So we now got a situation where the youth are turning on the community, robbing people, stealing the cars. Don't get mad at them, get mad at yourself. We gave birth to the circumstances that has given rise to what the youth are doing. And the sad thing about it, whether we like it or not, whether we get on board with the youth or not, the bottom line is quite clear. White folks haven't declared war on black folk. They already had a war on black folk, but white folk have made up their minds that we're not going to hide our racism any longer. It is now in your face. It is blatant. It is obvious. It is no longer under the table. Why? Because they don't have a reason to hide them. See, when we go back to the end of the 60s, after they killed Dr. King, federal government was pushed to its brink, brothers and sisters. They said we could never let nothing like this happen again. The 60s, without question, with the exception only of the Garvey movement of the 20s, pushed America to the brink of disintegration. They had to deal with SNCC, they had to deal with CORE, they had to deal with the Panthers, they had the SCLC, and even though the Urban League and NAACP were founded by white folk, they did have some black revolutionaries inside of them who were sincerely committed to making a difference. So the white man had to fight 20 legitimate black organizations all at the same time. When they killed Dr. King in '68, they said, what can we do to make sure we never get a Negro upheaval like this ever again in life? He said, first thing you're going to have to do is neutralize black people economically. Yeah. They said, you got to understand something. The Southern Christian Leadership Council was funded on black pennies. You got to understand something. SNCC and Cord, Stokely and King and Malcolm and them, they were funded by black pennies. Yeah. Working class black folk funded that movement. So if you want to kill it, you got to kill the black man's ability to get a job and give out charity to his own. So they decided to deindustrialize the inner cities. They said, we taking all the jobs the hell out. Get the factories out of there. We want no industrial infrastructure nowhere near the ghetto. So when white folks made white flight, they took the industrial infrastructure with them. But they said that's not enough. Because even though you take away the jobs, they will make their own if they have the skills. So we now have to go into the high school and deindustrialize the high school. So they took out carpentry, plumbing, auto body. They took out electric shop, HVAC. They said strip the Negro of his ability to work for himself using his hands. Now let's see how they finance the Black Panthers with no job. Now let's see how they finance the civil rights movement with no job. They killed the civil rights movement in part by killing the economic opportunity in the ghetto. And then they said that's not enough either. Since they don't have no job, they're going to have idle time. We got to give them something with which they can spend their idle time. So they called up the Italian mafia. Said, we got a job for you. We want to flood the ghetto with cheap dope. We want every black person we can find addicted to dope. We don't care what kind of this, crack, heroin, opium, dope them up. We want to do to the Negro what the British did to the Chinese and the opium. That's exactly what they did. And because there was no jobs, the only way the black man could feed his family was to partake in the illegal economy. And then they said, that ain't enough. We then got to create a situation that removes the black man altogether from the neighborhood. So then they came up with a brand new, improved mass incarceration for nonviolent drug offenses program. And they started snatching black men out of the houses. And then with the black man in jail, they said, we ain't done. While he's away, we got to educate his woman and give her a job. So by the time he gets home, she will feel she don't need him no more. This is what they did. It's called social engineering. We study it in psychology. And one thing you have to understand is that a psychological trap is more powerful than the physical trap because you don't see the trap. We have to stop saying, well, they decided to be on drugs. Well, they decided to sell the drugs. He decided to break the law and go to jail. But who put the ingredients of disaster in the community for the situation to give rise to the problems we got today? We are responsible. But secondary blame is for the victim. The perpetrator is always primarily responsible. And we got to stop letting white folk off the hook